James, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, hello everyone. I am James. I am a front-end engineer currently working at Swiftly, just a transit tech company out in SF. I was actually at a smaller startup, but they got acquired, so now I'm working here. Um, Before then, I've worked at a few larger companies that you may have actually heard of, like Amazon and Airbnb. Um, but all doing front end engineering is what I've been interested in ever since I graduated from college. So that's really been my focus area. But throughout my kind of experience at some of these companies, I've started to care a lot more about things like web accessibility and web technologies. Um, that's pretty much it. But I'm not talking about any of that today. I'm talking about portfolios, which is not something you build at a company. Um, so without further ado, I will share my screen and get started. All right, let me send this up. So yeah, we're talking about front-end developer portfolios today, and I don't know how to use this. Um, so here are a few various examples. You probably have seen some examples as you've just met people or browsed the web or etc. And they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Um, but like the questions that we want to answer today are how do you go around building one of these? What would you go into designing some of this stuff? What should you even include on it? What would be helpful? And like, what's the point of all this, right? Um, I would be a bit remiss if I just show you other people's portfolios. So I'm going to show you some of my own first. The last one that I built was in 2013, so over 10 years ago. But when Cathy approached me about this, I figured I should probably make a more recent one. So we can go through some of my process for that as well. But I will show you both my old and new portfolios, as well as two other ones that I found from around the web that kind of illustrate the breadth of what you can do with this kind of thing. Uh, get this out here. Okay, so mine tend to be pretty simple, and this is like a much picture of me when I was much younger. Um, but this is when I was still in college, and you'll see that mostly this is focusing on a lot of the projects that I worked on at hackathons, since that's all I had to show at the time. It is very simple. It's just single page, and we have a contact form here, resume, oops, I'm supposed to do that. Links to socials, etc. Fast forward 10 years, and not too much has changed really. It's still just a single page showing a lot of the same projects, but it's an updated design, just showing how like my own personal design sensibilities have evolved over 10 years. Um, So I have a lot more in the blurb about myself now, just as kind of a story. Really focusing more on showing off the languages that I work with, um, as well as putting more of a highlight on the different projects that I have worked on. But unlike the previous ones, this one is actually responsive. So you can actually view this at various um, screen widths, and it does work on mobile correctly, which is not something I really did before. I also removed the contact form. We'll go into more of that, more of why that is later. But here's another one that I found. This one's from Brittany Chung. I do not know her. I've never met any of these people before, but I just wanted to highlight this is like a very classic, simple kind of portfolio page. Really just text only, but it's clean. It you know presents the information in a very clear way and just shows off all this person's different projects as well as full resume as well, um, and a full archive, which is actually quite interesting. They've worked on all sorts of stuff, and really catalog it quite well. So this is certainly an approach you can take, and this is very, very Now, simple is not the right word. Minimalistic is, I guess, is what I would choose, because it's not like there isn't a lot here. There really is, but it's presented in a very concise way. We're going to go to the opposite of that. The last portfolio I have to show to you today is from someone named Jesse, and it's kind of insane. So you've got this full 3D thing going on where you can do this, look at all the projects like this. Um, I think there's a game there as well if you want to play it, but I'm not going to go into that right now. And you can just fully interact with this little ramen shop, which is really, really quite interesting. And this really showcases, again, his abilities, like working with 3JS is what I believe this is built in. Well, like about various skill sets. Yeah, I'm going to shut off the sound on that and go back to my slides. Not that. That's not what I wanted. This one. There we go. Okay, so we've looked at a few different slides now, or sorry, portfolios now, but like what's the point of making one of these in the first place? Why are so many people doing it? And there are a few different points, I guess, that we could go through. One is to like just showcase your work and your abilities in a more visual way. You can just have a resume, but it's all just text. That's kind of boring. And not especially as front-end developers, our work is a lot more visual. So we want to show that off. We want to kind of showcase our abilities in that way without just having to describe the algorithms that we've improved and like some by like 2% or whatever. You can also express your individual sense of style this way. I showed off how my own sense of style has kind of evolved. And I'm sure that as you grow, you will also come to think of things differently. So yeah, this also gives employers a better look at your skill set, both in terms of showcasing the project that you worked on, but also the portfolio itself is a good showcase of your skill set. You can show like how talented you are with web technologies, either in terms of like flashy things like doing a full 3D kind of thing, or having it built really clean to spec, having your site load really fast, passing all the lighthouse tests. You know how it is. And honestly, building websites is just fun. That's why I do this stuff. I started off building it just because I wanted an excuse to make something, and this seemed as useful as anything to build. So, who really needs one of these? You might be asking, like, do you need one of these? And honestly, I would say that primarily web and product designers would need this stuff because it's a good opportunity to showcase the projects you worked on, but also you can build a story for why this needs to be built this way, what your thought process for doing it, and especially in terms of like hiring, when we look at portfolios are more required, I guess, for this kind of role in terms of what employers are looking for. Freelance web developers as well. Obviously, when you're looking for clients, they want to see some of your past work. So you would want a portfolio to be able to showcase that. A resume doesn't really cut it quite as well in this field. When you're seeking your first industry job and you don't have as much stuff to put on your resume, this is also a good opportunity to showcase like some of the other stuff you've worked on and really impress a potential recruiter in the industry if that's of interest to you. And honestly, could it just be anyone? So you might be asking, like, I've built 3 portfolios now. I didn't show the very first one because I couldn't find the code for that one. But has this actually helped me get a job? And the answer is not really. It was fun to do it, but for someone like me who is really focused on like getting in the industry and just building stuff within the industry, this having a portfolio doesn't really build the case for like getting recruiters to respond. It is mostly these days just about the resume, and they're scanning the resume to look for certain terms to decide whether to even give you an interview or not. But that being said, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It still is fun to do, and there still are reasons to do it if you don't fit like my kind of um, what's the word uh, persona. That's the word. Yeah. So if you're not trying to just do an industry job, or if you just want to show off a little, honestly, I think it's worth it still. Anyway, you don't need to justify it to anyone but yourself. Going into actually building the portfolio, some general advice: don't over optimize this stuff. I was talking with one of my old mentors at a previous company I was working at, and he was also talking about building a portfolio actually. And he told me about how he had built this super fancy React app with like optimized menus and pages, and he can just build templates really quickly, and then realized he was never going to use any of that because it was just a personal site and there's not too much he wanted to even put on it. So you could waste a lot of time doing this stuff, but ultimately, like consider like you don't really need to. You can just keep it simple, and that's fine. But if you want to go super complex, that's okay too. Just don't let that stop you from, or don't let it intimidate you from making the site in the first place. You should consider SEO, particularly with portfolios. This is what you're trying to show off, and especially when people are like Googling your name, they should be able to find you. And these are all factors that take into account. So the Jesse's portfolio I was showing you earlier, the really cool 3D one, that is really visually impressive, but it has no text on it. That is to say, if you searched for it, you would never find any of the text that he put on it. It's not very optimized for that case, and it's not very accessible either as a result, because a screen reader would never be able to interact with that stuff. That's what I tend to keep the things that I build very simple, very just using the web technologies, and just having everything in text so that anyone could see it. It's not just about optimizing for screen readers necessarily. Like, yeah, I guess that it's the case that a recruiter could be using a screen reader to try to look at your portfolio, but these things can also just get passed into their corporate systems, and then the way that the algorithms go through your page and try to pick out the information is very similar to how a screen reader would work. So you would want that to work, right? Responsiveness is also key. Most people are browsing everything on their phones these days, as much as I wish it weren't the case. Your design does need to look good on a phone. That's just the reality of the world we live in now. But this is your space, so you should do what makes you happy. Like these are just like general rules of the road, but like you can do whatever you want. And I don't think it would hurt or help you that much either way. The best framework is the one that you know. Most of my previous portfolios were just built in plain HTML and CSS, and back then I was still using jQuery. A couple of years ago, I had a false start with trying to build a new one. I was trying to build one in React as well because I had been learning that at the time. And I just kind of got nowhere with it because I didn't know React too well. And I just got so bulky that I didn't really want to finish it. This new one that I built is, again, just HTML and CSS back to the basics, but that's what I know. So there you go. That being said, you could use this just to learn new stuff. I use this, yes, this was HTML and CSS, but I use this also to learn Tailwind, which is a CSS framework that I had never used before. And it was really easy to use, and I really like it now. And now I probably will use it in future projects, but this was a good chance for me to try it out. What should actually go on your portfolio? This opinions vary on this, but I think for me personally, the basics are just like a little bio about yourself. You should get to show off who you are and just tell people like, what are your interests? What is your experience? What do you like doing? The projects that you're proud of. You don't need to put everything on there, especially if you have a lot of them. I don't, because I have really fallen off of doing side projects since I started working full time, but I understand a lot of people would. So honestly, stick them on there. You could go into detail. You could have mini case studies where you, like I said earlier, write out the full story for what this project is, why it's built, and the decisions that you made into doing that, and that can only help you. If at all possible, if this stuff is live, if it's public facing, show it off, link to it, and that will really help build your case as well. And lastly, keep it up to date. You don't want a bunch of outdated projects on there that you aren't even proud of anymore, right? You should show off your skills that you want to showcase and make sure to link out to your resume, because ultimately that is what goes into recruiting systems. So you want a way for people to access that and then have a way to contact you. So I said that earlier, I had a contact form on my old one and I don't anymore. I would also recommend not putting a full contact form on unless you're using one of those existing website builders, because I got a lot of spam from that and I built that personally. So that was no good. Nowadays, it's just links to socials, and that seems to work just fine. All right. How do you actually design a good looking page? I will go into like tools for how to design it. So you can use Figma, that's free. I've been using it, but my methodology is not one I would personally recommend, which is that I don't really design things before building them. I just kind of build it and move it around until it looks good. If you want like a better picture of what to build, you should do this. You should do it this way. Good font pairing suggestions. There's a site called Font Pair that's really good for this. And Google Fonts has expanded so much in the last few years. So now you could have pretty much any style that you want, and that's really useful. And that's kind of what I use as well. And you should look for design inspiration everywhere. Doesn't have to just be in other portfolios. And I'll go through here's some of my design inspiration for when I built my site. So this is a lot of album covers and like video game screens. It's not so much like I was looking at other portfolios and like, I want to make that. And anything can inspire you for design. So like fashion labels, other websites, posters, etc. Anything works. And I would encourage you to like try to find things in your daily life that you think look good and try to incorporate those elements into your own portfolio. As for actually the nitty gritty of hosting it, here are a few options. This is for just hosting static sites, which is largely speaking what a portfolio is going to be. You can make your portfolio really fancy and have a database and everything, but then you will have to pay to host it. Me personally, I use Cloudflare Pages. I've never used it before, but this one I wanted to try it out. Particularly, it's going to fit into the next piece of this. But GitHub Pages works just as well. Vercels, I believe, specifically for deploying Next.js apps. So if that's a framework that you are interested in, it will play really well with that. But quite honestly, you don't need to do any of this stuff. You could just host static pages in an S3 bucket, point your URL to it, and call it a day. You don't need any of the fancy stuff. But these are some of the nice options. And you can do all these on the free tier. Which I believe is all you'll never need. The very first portfolio I ever made, a lot of these tools didn't exist yet, so I did pay for hosting. Nowadays, I don't believe you need to, especially with the amount of traffic that you can expect to get on a portfolio site. It's going to be fairly low, let's be honest. So you could probably stay below the free limits on any of this stuff. Lastly, you should get a domain name. Domain names are fun. I got a new domain name for this one just because I wanted to try something different. Here are a few different registrars. You can go through Namecheap, which is what I used to use, or Cloudflare, which is what I would recommend now. And that's why I went with Cloudflare Pages earlier, because it integrates really well with the Cloudflare registrar. Cloudflare, of course, is the only one out of these that sells the domains at cost. That is to say, they don't make a profit on it, so it tends to be the cheapest. But they don't have as large a selection of top-level domains. So if you want like a really fancy one, like again, the fancy ones have really exploded over the last few years. So you might have to go to a more specialized registrar like Porkbun to get to those. But yeah, those are just a few of the options that are available to you. Yeah. And that's all I had. I know it's very basic and I went really fast, but that's just kind of it. So I will pass it back to Cathy and ask you guys if you have any questions.
Yeah, thank you. We'll open the floor to questions. Yeah, Bielina, over to you.
Yeah, just Cathy, can you share the slides with the Q&A?
Sorry.
We're actually having really great questions, James. Everybody love your presentation.
Amazing session, James. Thank you. The first question we have is, as a front-end developer, should I be concerned with designing my portfolio from scratch, or is it acceptable to use a pre-existing design and focus primarily on building it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that if you're just talking about using a template, that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with using a template. That's literally what they're made for. The caveat that I would add to that is don't steal. That is say, don't look at someone else's portfolio, just download the page and swap out the names. That's no good. You should probably, at the very least, try to build it yourself, right? But you don't need to design everything from scratch. It's just something I personally like to do. So I do it.
Thank you for your answer. The following question is going to be, what project would be considered impressive for a junior front-end developer? Should we include something we work on a previous job in our portfolio? It's a great question, I know.
Yeah. I would say that yes. Look, it's impressive if you think it's impressive. But if we're talking about previous jobs, it becomes a little tricky, just because sometimes your employment contract doesn't allow you to actually claim that stuff as your own and then put it on your own website. So I would try to clear that with whatever company that you work with, just to make sure everything's above board. You don't want to get sued over a portfolio. But if it's all clear, absolutely put that on there. I want to put some of the previous stuff that I've worked on before on my portfolio as well, but I couldn't.
Thank you, James. We have a lot of questions your way. So next question is from Shriti. She is asking, what is a good number of projects to display in a portfolio?
I don't have a good answer for that. it's however many that you think are appropriate. It's again really like, oh, you should put like 10, exactly 10 is how many you need. That's not going to work, especially if you don't even have 10 projects. What are you going to do about that, right? You put as many as you put as many as you have until you think that you're putting in way too many. That is like you're scrolling too much to get to what you consider to be your best projects, and then you start cutting.
I appreciate it. Great answer. And what is the biggest mistake developers make when they're building their portfolio? What is your biggest mistake?
My biggest mistake is trying to do too much with it. I think trying to do too much with it too early, and ultimately that can lead to just not finishing it in the first place. It's more important just finish it, right? And you can keep building on it as time goes on.
Awesome. So for a junior who is just starting, it's okay to showcase small learning projects,
Absolutely.
but simple.
Yeah, that's what I was doing for my first few portfolios. I was just hackathon projects. I built those over 24 hours. That's like nothing, but I still put it on there because it's all I had to show at the time.
Thank you, James. I'm looking for more questions. Okay, yes, one more. What's more important, quantity or quality for projects in portfolio?
I would say quality. Again, like you can put every single thing you've ever touched on your portfolio, but that's not going to fulfill the primary purpose, which is to show off your most impressive skills. So if you have like some particularly impressive ones, you should definitely make sure those go on first. And if you are in the fortunate position of having so many projects to choose from, then you can be a little more judicious with cutting some of the ones that you are less proud of.
Okay, we're having two more questions. First question, what is the best CSS framework for beginners?
Yeah, you don't want to ask me that. The best CSS framework for beginners is CSS. I don't think that you need a framework. Tailwind is really nice and you should try it. It's really easy to get started with it. For a guy like me, I'm pretty opinionated about design. So whenever I work with a framework, I end up just getting a little frustrated with its limitations when I want to build something that's not quite supported by it. And I think that it is just useful to learn CSS in the first place. But if you really want a framework, I guess I will recommend Tailwind to you.
Thank you, James. Opinion is always important. Second questions and last, I think, have you ever been asked about your portfolio content or design in interview?
A little bit. Not asked per se, but sometimes an interviewer will be like, "Oh yeah, I saw your website. I really liked it," or no one ever told me they hated it. So I would hope that they are just keeping their thoughts to themselves. However, like if you put a list of skills on your portfolio, then that's fair game for you to be interviewed about. So don't just put everything you ever touched. I know a lot of people like to put just like all the Microsoft products and stuff on there. If you don't feel confident in answering questions about that, then don't put it on there.
Thank you so much. I'm looking the chat. I don't think we have any more questions. I hope I don't miss anybody. James, first of all, hands down, amazing session. We're extremely thankful to have you. And is there any personal advice you can share to us as a front-end developers? We are also passionate about it. What's your tips for our success?
In general, for fun development, I would say like front development is a space that used to move really quickly. It doesn't as much anymore ever since React exploded onto the scene and took over everything. But there still is a lot of interesting developments going on out there. So don't lose that passion. Just keep exploring, keep trying the new stuff. You may not be using it regularly, but it's good to know what's out there at least. And that helps you form more educated opinions as well. Like at my new job or my current job, they're using Vue and I've never touched Vue before. And that's kind of a blind spot for me. So I've been spending a lot of time learning about that and its comparison with what I'm familiar with.
Thank you so much for your detailed answer. We are being honored to have you as a speaker today. Hope you're gonna visit Frontend Queens again. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. You're going to be able to find the recorded video if you want to rewatch again, James. And if you want to see his slides, we can share with you in the chat. Connect with our speaker today on LinkedIn, on social media. We are honored to have you. It was an amazing session. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having me.